All right, well, we might as well get started. I am Chris Gardy. I'm a program manager on the Dynamics 365 for Operations team, what was Dynamics AX. I specialize in Office integration. I've been spending a lot of time the last year as well working on the Common Data Service and the Power Apps story there. A lot of what you're going to see today is repeated content from prior presentations. So if you've come to a presentation from me before, feel free to ask questions about anything that might have changed. And throughout the presentation, feel free to put up your hand if you want clarifications or anything like that. So we're going to run through Office integration with Dynamics 365 for Operations. If I end up saying AX, you'll have to forgive me because that's what I've been saying the last number of years, and it's a lot easier to say. So I might just drop into that once in a while. The other thing to mention is I had a little bit of a cough. It probably won't play up, but if it does, I might have to do a lozenge. So yeah, just forgive me up ahead of time. And forgive, apparently, the creaky stage as I walk around. I was born in New Zealand. I moved to Fargo like 12 years ago to work for Microsoft. I've been living there ever since, working on the Microsoft Business Framework and then Dynamics AX 2009, 12, AX7, and what is now Operations for... Operations, and then the Common Data Service as well. The last 3 or 4 years I've been focused on Office integration. So I'd like to know who's in the room. So customers that might be in the room. Customers. Partners. A lot of partners. Consultants. A couple Microsoft employees. Okay, sprinkled in there down the back. All right, and currently using, so AX 2009. 2012, okay, and then AX7 or Operations, okay, good. Thinking about moving to AX7, okay, a few, okay, that's great. All right, so we're going to be focusing on AX7 or what is now Dynamics 365 for Operations today. Let's get rolling. So we're going to look at what the landscape is. We're going to talk a little bit about identity, because identity is so important to everything that we do inside of operations. And then we're going to talk a little bit about data and security and with regards to entities. So entities are kind of the key building block that we use in all of our Office integration capabilities. We'll run through a number of Excel capabilities, so static export to Excel and the Excel add-in. We'll get into, we'll look at journal entry in Excel. And then we'll have a brief look at Word, so building a Word document template and enabling export to Word, which is kind of a lightweight reporting scenario. We'll have a look at document management, the sysmailer capabilities, and then we'll have a brief talk about what's happened since RTW. There hasn't been a lot because we've been working on the Common Data Service, but there has been some things. And then we can touch on some future plans, and there should be plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So our goal is to empower every person and every organization to achieve more. We're really striving for more personal computing. We want to reinvent productivity, and we want to build the intelligent cloud. And part of that is integrating with the intelligent cloud of Office 365. We are driving a lot of value through access to real-time ERP data, process efficiency, and enhanced performance. And we are striving for faster response time over time as well. So we're going to be talking about today Office 365 and Dynamics up the top there. The previous session was on Power BI, if you caught that one. That's certainly another interesting part of the Office 365 play there. We're also going to be touching on, in terms of technologies, down the bottom there in the platform, we're going to be talking about OData and Azure Blob Storage, so both of those come heavily into play. So Azure Active Directory. So identity is is vitally important. Whenever you sign into Dynamics 365 for operations, you're using Azure Active Directory to sign in. That identity is shared across the add-ins. It's shared when you go out to SharePoint. It's really this all-encompassing identity that gets passed around. The identity that you have for Dynamics 365 is shared with Office 365, so it's nice and seamless there. So there's two authentication flows. There's a browser-based authentication, which uses SAML 2.0, and then there's a separate OAuth 2.0 flow that occurs. The reason I mention these differences in authentication, these two separate types of authentication, is because when you sign into the browser, depending on the browser, that authentication is not, that identity is not shared with a number of the add-ins and capabilities that we have that I'll be showing later on. So, for example, the Excel add-in that I'll be showing, the add-in runs a little IE window, Internet Explorer window. So if you sign in an Edge, you're doing a browser-based authentication for Edge. And then when the Excel add-in opens up, you've got a separate authentication context over here. So authentication is one of the top pain points for using the add-ins. But usually it can be solved just by forcing a sign out and then sign back in. Usually good. And we've done a lot of work over the last year to really make this a really solid story. So we hardly ever get complaints that stick these days as far as bugs and escalations and issues. We've kind of touched on the browser-based authentication. So OAuth 2, it is an authorization grant flow. It's basically just passing tokens around. It's saying, it's allowing Azure Active Directory to authenticate you, and then you're basically saying, yes, I want to sign into this Excel add-in, and a token gets passed over to the Excel add-in or the Word add-in that we're using for Office integration capabilities. So entities are a key entry point into Dynamics 365 for operations. I keep on wanting to say Dynamics AX. And OData is the channel. OData is the channel that all of that communication goes through, and entities are the thing that are exposed via OData. There is role-based security on all of the entities. So oftentimes, one of the first questions I get is when you're accessing the data for your Office integration capabilities, what is the security that's going on there? It's the same security that's on the entities. So as long as there is role-based security applied to the entities, in addition to the tables and forms, then the security will be set up and be working just fine. Skip over that. So it's worth mentioning that the OData service is a synchronous service. So the data management workspace that you might have used is doing asynchronous operations on the data. All of the operations with OData and with the Excel add-in and with the Word add-in, they're all synchronous. So the user's going to be sitting there and waiting. The advantage of that is that they get feedback about any security issues, any errors, anything like that. But the data entity really provides an abstraction encapsulation over top of the otherwise complex table schema. We used to have some gaps in terms of entity coverage. That's getting smaller and smaller. And with your feedback, if you find any gaps in terms of entities that need to be built, any entities that aren't working properly or aren't secured properly, we're filling in those gaps over time. Great. So yeah, that one data entity is both used for services, so the OData service and the data management platform. So all of the import-export capabilities that you're using in the data management workspace are also using the data entity. We'll just skip past the patterns. So OData, so if you're interested in looking at what's going on over the wire, that's certainly something that you can do. The easiest thing to use to have a look at what's going on over the wire is a tool called Fiddler. You can install Fiddler and then have a look at the communications that are actually happening over the HTTP channel. And you'll see like there's bottom 3 examples of OData queries. When the Excel add-in or the Word add-in start up, it pulls $metadata to know about all of the entities inside of operations. And then all of the data and function calls are also happening via the OData service as well. So you can have a look at those over the wire. So let's talk about Excel. Specifically, let's have a quick look at export to Excel. So the basics of export to Excel is the static export to Excel. So inside of operations, we've got an open and office menu. I'll just show you that quickly. So you can see that here. If I'm on, so this is on a customer form. We'll just go back to the all customers view, fleet customers. We've got this open in Microsoft Office menu. If I open that up, I have open in Excel, export to Excel, and export to Word. And so this export to Excel option is a static export of this customer data. And so I can trigger that. And then I get the ability to download that file. I can save it and then open it. And then so I've got the static set of data here. So that matches the data that I'm seeing there. You can also, if you've got a number of rows, if you've got a large number of rows, you can select just the ones that you're interested in. And then you can right-click on the grid and say, I want to export just the marked rows. So you can control the data that gets exported out of that. So yeah, right-click context menu, all rows versus marked rows. The one limitation, well, it's a big limitation. The limitation that we have in there is the 2,000 rows. So we limit the static export to Excel to 2,000 rows because the static export to Excel is doing a formatted export. It's making use of the form. It's basically doing operations as if you, as a customer, are like paging through the data in the form and copying it out manually. The advantage of that is it's a nice formatted export. The disadvantage of that is that it's expensive in terms of time and it can impact other users. So we limit it to 2,000 rows. So we're working with the solutions architecture team right now to come up with an alternative to that, which is basically going to be an unformatted export. So you'll have the option to do a formatted export up to a certain number of rows, likely a little bit larger than 2,000, maybe like 10,000, and then we'll do like an unformatted export past that point. Yeah, was there a question? Yeah, no, we don't. The question was about being able to control the number of rows. We don't provide that control. We might, in addition to adding that unformatted export, we might open up a kind of a slider for administrators to be able to tweak as well later on. But that's kind of a future item for us. How far future? Hopefully in the next update. Well, no, not in the next update. Which would be update 5, because we are releasing updates really fast at this point. Probably in the update after that. Yeah. Right. Yes, you have a particularly frustrating example of having just like a few too many over the 2,000. But yeah, we hear that a lot, where people have kind of in the realm of like 2,000 to 10,000 rows, which wouldn't be that bad to be able to export. It wouldn't impact other users that much. Yeah, so certainly that hard cutoff is affecting a lot of people. Yep. Yeah, so we'll work on getting that rectified. So in addition to the static export to Excel, you saw the file save as dialog there briefly. So this facilitates downloading via the browser just the file or saving to OneDrive for Business or SharePoint. We have plans to open that up more in the future. That hasn't happened just yet. This allows you to export to OneDrive or SharePoint in addition to open up an Excel Online or Word Online. And yeah, the SharePoint host is set via auto discovery. So as long as you have an Office license associated with your tenant, and with your users, it should just start working. They should be able to start hitting the SharePoint sites that you have on that tenant just fine. So I will just show you that briefly. So when I hit this export to Excel option, you can see this dialog. I was hitting the download immediately, but you can save to OneDrive for Business or SharePoint. And what it'll get the user to do is to browse. And then once they browse, they pick a file folder, push that to the file folder, and then it'll open up inside of Excel Online or Word Online. I will not tempt the demo gods and mess with that right now, though. With the conference Wi-Fi. All right, so open in Excel. So there was an open in Excel option in that menu. So the open in Excel options, we automatically add open in Excel options for any entity that has the same root data source as the form. So we basically look at the form, look at the tables that are the root data sources for the form. We look at the tables that are the root data sources for the entity, and then we match those two up. So any number of forms in the system, you can go to the Open in Office menu, and you'll see an Open in Excel option, and that'll just be a default option that's added in there. I will show you that. So you can see one here on this Fleet Customers form for fleet management customers. And then if I open that, you'll see by default, I get a default set of fields. And my Excel add-in opens up in a task pane on the right-hand side, retrieves metadata, and then retrieves data. And then that data is available for me to edit as needed. All right, conference Wi-Fi is behaving so far. All right, so up in here, this is a fully editable data set. So if I want to change this email address, for example, to philspencer11, I can go ahead and do that. And then publish that. And then it writes back. And then I should be able to come out here, hit the refresh button, and then I can see that email address changes. So in a lot of places throughout the application, throughout the different modules, on different forms, you've got that default open in Excel option that shows up there just from the fact of having an entity. And certainly if you're a partner and you have forms that you're adding, you should also add entities and then make sure that they share the same root data source, and you'll get these default open in Excel options as well. So we'll go back and just talk a little bit more about those. So the open in Excel options can be automatically generated for an entity that shares the same root data source as the current form. That first one is the one that we talked about. We also add one automatically for templates that share the same root data source. So we'll touch a little bit, we'll touch on templates a little bit more later with the Word scenario. But an example of that is available here. So you can see this customer locations template purports to show a map of customer locations. So if I click on that, and then open it, you'll see it has just a little title, an account, and I can say enable editing, and the add-in starts up. And it has a map that on a separate sheet that isn't working right now. But the count, at least, is a little formula field that's just going to do a count of the number of customers in here. So it's a simple example showing that you can put a template into the document templates form and make that available as an open in Excel option. And again, we'll see that form in a little bit when we look at the Word options. Great. The other way that you can add open in Excel options is programmatically. So you can add either an entity or a template programmatically using the Excel Export API, and there's documentation out on the wiki for that now. In addition, the open in Excel option can also have a dedicated button to kind of call more attention to it, and the journal entry experience takes advantage of this, and we'll see that in a little bit as well. So let's talk a little bit more about the add-in. So the add-in replaces the old AX 2012 Excel add-in that some of you would be familiar with. It requires no installation. It's using the Office Web.js API. It's basically a little web page that's running over in the task pane. The advantage of that is that it is very low maintenance. It updates itself automatically. Requires no prior installation is the big benefit. When you share a document around, the add-in is actually shared with the document. So if you send a document to a coworker, they'll be prompted to sign in with their credentials, but it will use their credentials and just run. They don't need to install anything ahead of time. That's a big change over the X2012 add-in. The small minus is that JavaScript API has a slightly smaller coverage area than the old Visual Studio tools for Office. So there are some things that we're not able to do right now, and we're working with the Excel team on a number of things. Yeah, is there a question? Yeah, so the other small thing about this is that the JavaScript API requires Office 2016. Yeah, so the latest version of Office. So if you're using like Excel Online, you're fine. That fully supports it. But if you have desktop Office, you need Office 2016, Excel 2016 to support that. It's very simple and productive. We already looked at refresh and publish, but let's have a look at, jump over to the rentals form, and we will just refresh that form. Sorry. So if I pop this open in Office menu, we've got our Fleet Management Rentals. We'll download that workbook, and we'll just have a look at some of the experience there. Great. So here's our rental columns. We've just got 5 right now, and it's retrieving metadata. We don't, well, okay. I guess I am speaking. I was going to say we just hold our breath slightly to make sure that the conference Wi-Fi, there we go. Okay, good. So as I'm moving around these columns, you'll see this field information changes over here. So we've got source information that's telling me which entity this is pointing at. So this is the fleet rental entity. Fleet Management Rentals being the label, Fleet Rental being the name, so you can find it nice and easily in case you want to do some template building yourself. And then it has field information as well, so the label, the name, and the type. So kind of full information over there. Then you'll see below the field, the entity and field information, the source and field information, there's helpers that appear over here. So here's a calendar lookup. And then if I hit on this driver license field, this is a relationship lookup to be able to just point and click, add a value, and select a different value. And then we have filtering capabilities as well. So if I go to filter and then add a filter field, and I can look for last name equals Spencer, so that I can filter at the OData service level the data that's coming back. So that data now is the only data that's being retrieved from the OData service. This allows you to kind of restrict that data set and make it download the data faster and therefore publish faster as well if you're doing publishing on some specific data set. So we'll just clear that filter out. And then refresh, and we'll get all of our data back. There's also a design experience within the Excel add-in. The design experience allows power users to add and remove fields. So we'll see an example of that in here. So we've got our selected fields down the bottom right-hand corner, and then we've got our available fields up here. What we're going to do is we're going to add a couple of fields. So we'll add start fuel level. You can just double-click on those fields, and then add end fuel level. You've also got an add button that you can click over here. So the other thing that I'm interested in doing is adding a formula field. So that's one of the newer capabilities that we added. So let's just refresh that and see, oh, fuel level, sorry, wrong fields. I'll just remove those, double click to remove as well. Start mileage and end mileage, those are the ones that I want. Yes. All right, we'll refresh the data now that we've added those two fields, and we've got a little bit of data in there, mostly just some zeros. So this is just some demo data that I added before. So if I say this rental started with 500 as the mileage, and then that finished with 750, I can go ahead and publish that. I've added those fields, and I've published to them, and I can refresh that and see that data. And then if I use the design experience again, I'm going to add a formula field that's going to tell me something interesting. And that is, it's going to do a calculation for me to show me what the trip mileage was. So I hit this formula button, I get a formula field added, and then I can set the name and label, trip mileage. And then to get the calculation, I can just go out to Excel and just do what I'd normally do in Excel and say equals end mileage minus start mileage. And we'll just copy that. Actually, we'll cut that out, and we'll put that into the trip mileage field. And so what that's doing is it's adding an extra field into my template so that the Excel editor knows about it, it respects it, it doesn't get rid of it. When I refresh the data, all of those values get calculated, and as the formula is actually there live. So even before you publish the data back, you can see the values and what's going on there. So if I enter in 100 and 300, I can see that the trip mileage is 200. You can use this, for example, to double check to make sure that you've got the values correct, and then I can publish those couple of new values back in there. So that formula field capability is quite nice. Filtering design experience, yes. Right, so why did we build the add-in instead of just using the Excel OData support? For a start, the built-in Excel OData support doesn't provide read-write capabilities in most circumstances. We also have translatable label support, so we make use of the dynamic AX labels, and you saw that in the example. Source and field information, that design experience, publish support, lookups, a whole number of things. To show off also this flowing language and company selection from the client, in addition to the label support, we'll just jump back into operations. And we will add a parameter because that's a nice fast way to do it. So we're just going to add lng equals fr as a parameter on the end of the URL. What that's going to do is it's going to throw operations into French. Great. I can't read French, but I know where the buttons are. So I'm going to do this open in Excel again. Telecharger. Great, we're going to open that up. It's going to flow that language through. You can see the workbook was initially created with French column labels, and then it's flowing that language through into the Excel add-in, and then all of the labels inside of the Excel add-in are all translated so that you've got status messages showing up in French. You've got all of the button labels are showing up in French as well. and then the data, of course, will come back just as it was before out of the database with its English. And then up in the settings, you've got an options button up here, options or settings. When you click on the options, you can then decide to switch the language as well. So you can switch the language back to English. Oui. I know like 2 French words. Oui and non. Great. So we're back into English. Great. Great. The question is about read-only fields? Yeah, so read-only fields are protected. Do I have an example of that? Let me see if I have an example of that. So, so read-only fields are protected. They used to, at RTW, the read-only fields, once you published, it would throw an error, or it would throw an error. Now what we do is we know that they're read-only. We throw away, we'd prompt the user and tell you, hey, you're making a change to a read-only field. We're going to get rid of the changes to that read-only field so that they don't have to wait for that error to come back. So then when they hit publish, it'll publish just the data that they're allowed to publish. So it knows about read-only. It knows about read-only on create. So allow edit and allow edit on create. There's also information like this key field. So it'll show you which ones are the key fields. And then it'll also show you which ones are the mandatory fields. So you can see that mandatory flag there. I don't think I've got any read-only fields. When we do journal entry, I'll have a quick look for read-only fields as well. Yeah, so a lot of the metadata and information about the entity is taken advantage of by the Excel add-in.
Can you use that connection as a data source for the pivot table?
Can you use that connection as a data source for the pivot table? Yes. So you can use the data that's in Excel pulled via the Excel add-in. You can use this data however you want. So. No, yeah, the question is about hooking up this data to a pivot table. So you can create a pivot table on this data. The Excel add-in is still going to be the thing that's doing the reading and writing of the data. Yeah, but once you've got that data in there, yeah, you can have a pivot table, and you can pull in a new set of data and then go to your pivot table and refresh that, and it'll do the pivot based on the data that's there. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that table there?
Yep.
That is a data source, not the connector.
Correct. Yep. Yep. Yes, he's just clarifying that this is the data source for the table. Yeah, actually, I haven't done this in a little while, but let's just quickly look at that. So just to show you pivot tables, so let's go to, if I highlight, let's just highlight the names and then see if it gives me some nice pivot tables. Wrong button. Recommended pivot tables. No. Let's do it off to the side here. So I've got those two fields those two columns selected. Recommended pivot tables. Yeah, so it's going to do a count by rental vehicle ID. So we'll say OK. Where is it going to put this? Oh, on a new sheet. That's right. Yeah, you can tell I haven't done this in a little while. And then, so I've got this pivot table that's now based on my rental data. That's now based on my rental data. If I change that rental data, the pivot table will be updated just by a right-click and refresh. And then if I want to get a chart, for example, I can go ahead and do that as well. So I can go recommended charts. And now I've got a chart that's based on some data that's coming back from an entity inside of Dynamics AX. So you can really do some nice lightweight reporting once you've got that data out into Dynamics, out into Excel. Great. So I mentioned this before about the troubleshooting. So as far as the Excel add-in sign-in, sign-out is concerned, that is usually trouble-free these days. The sign in, sign out is just up here under the user menu. And then the sign out button is right here. So we did two things to make this a lot easier. One is we just made it a lot more solid. Two is we put the user information visible on the add-in so you can see which user it is. So if you get problems with, I can't download the data, usually the problem is you're using the wrong, it's picked up the wrong identity. So you're using the wrong AAD identity. So that having that username right there helps with that a lot. Also having the email address helps differentiate if you have users that are called administrator and two tenants. The email address can help differentiate between those. And then if you want to sign in as a different user, you just hit sign out, and it'll do a sign out process, and then it'll come back around and ask you for your AAD identity to sign back in again. Great. Yeah, so I mentioned about any partners that are building forms, about building an entity and getting it ready for that kind of Excel add-in experience. So one, build an entity would be good. And then two is just do a little bit of work after that to add auto report. So that's an auto report field group. That defines the fields that come out of that open in Excel experience by default. An auto lookup field group, and that defines the fields that show up in the lookups. So whether it's one field or like ID description, or if you've got kind of a multi-part ID, you can put all parts of that ID plus a description in there. And then defining relationships between the entities so that the lookups show up. So the relationships between fields and the entities is what the lookups are powered off of. And then just open it up in the Excel add-in and see what it's like. And if you have problems with it, you can always put a support incident out there, or more likely a starting point is to just have a look at the documentation that'll kind of run through some of these things. And then also the /data /$ metadata is a great thing to look at as well. Yeah. Great. I mentioned before there's an Excel export API. This is well documented on the wiki now, so I won't get into this. It's more of an advanced scenario, but you can certainly programmatically add options, open in Excel options under that open in Office menu. We talked a little bit about this. So the Excel add-in is actually coming from the Office Store. Just to demonstrate that, I'll show that quickly. So because it's in the Office Store, when you share your workbook with a colleague, the workbook has information about the add-in inside of it. It has a pointer to the add-in in the Office Store, and that's why your colleague doesn't need to install something themselves. They'll just get a copy of the add-in pulled down from the Office Store. And you can see that if you go to Insert and then Store in Excel, and then you go up to the search field and search for Dynamics. And then you see this Dynamics Office add-in. And then, this is it. So add that, and then go to your favorite system that you want to use and add server information. Paste the URL for that in there and just get rid of the junk on the end. So you've got just the host name, and then say OK. And then it's going to try and use the identity that's already associated with IE or Excel, and sign in and retrieve metadata. So and then you're starting with a blank slate. But again, as I showed before, with the design experience and being able to add and remove columns, you can go into the design experience and you can add whole tables. So, for example, I can go add table. We'll go look at fleet customers. We'll say next, and we can grab all of the fields. Just click on one of the fields and Control A. And then add, and then done, yes, done, refresh. And so fairly quickly we can create a template that has all of the fleet customer data inside of it. And then if you want to do something to that and publish that, make it available inside of the document templates form, you can use that options button that we talked about before, go to the data connector and just say clear binding data. And that just clears all of the data out of the workbook. If you're sharing it with a colleague that might not have access to the data that you actually have in the workbook, that might be an idea as well, is to just clear out the data that's currently in the workbook, then save it, send it over to them so that it's blanked out. Great.
Can you add additional tables?
Yes, you can. Yeah, so the question is, can you add additional tables? Yes, you can. So I've got, for example, this one that I did the pivot table on still open with the fleet management rentals. I can go to this other sheet and go to design and then add table, and it's the same experience that we were looking at just before. So I can go ahead and add all of... What's that, sorry? Yeah, you can display, yes, you can display the data on the same sheet. Yeah, and I'll show that with the journal entry experience. Can you write a query that joins the tables? No. So the question is about how do you join those tables? So they're not tables, they're entities. And the way that the entities get joined is by the relationship between them. So when you have one entity, you can say add I'm just going to close all of these Excel workbooks, sorry, because it restarted on me. Apparently I had too many open. Yeah, it'll use the relationship between the two entities, and so if I go to customer, for example, and we'll just get the customer workbook. That, by the way, is the definition of giving a presentation. When you do prep all for 2 days and Excel is solid the whole time and then it crashes during the presentation. That's just how it works. So I've got this fleet customers, and now I'm going to go to the design, and I believe that fleet rentals is listed as a lines data source off of the customer. So, oh, it is not. I am telling a lie. What is an example of one? So if the fastest way I can do that is I'll just add the journal data source. So if I add some fields from the journal data source, actually what I'll do, I'll jump into the journal entry experience, and then I'll show you those relationships from there. That'll be the easiest way. Yeah, so I'll come back to that question, sorry. In addition to the design experience inside of the Excel add-in, there's a form, the Workbook Designer form, that is still available to provide starting points for your workbooks. You can search for Excel Workbook Designer inside of Operations, and that'll show up. It's an interesting starting point for those that aren't confident with the design experience inside of the Excel add-in. But now that we have that dialed in, this form gets used very infrequently. And we touched on the design time, add tables, fields, related data sources. So the related data sources is what I'll touch on when we get to the journal entry experience. So journal entry in Excel. So let me jump to this. So it's basically the application team has created a number of templates that provide users with the option of doing journal entry in the client, like this. So I can go to lines, and I can see, I can do journal entry inside of the client, or I have this Open Lines in Excel button that they've added directly onto the ribbon here. Instead of being under the Open in Office menu, they've got it under here. And when you open this, it opens up a nice little experience there, a nice little drop dialog. And I can pick, yep, I want to do general journal line entry, and say OK. And then I can do journal entry inside of Excel. Once it loads. Great. So you can see I've got a number of lines that I already created in here. The advantage of being out in Excel, the number one advantage is just, well, there's two big advantages. One is you can have a template that has data inside of it already. So you can kind of have a template journal entry, and you can just use that data again for a new journal entry. The other advantage is that you can work with the lines really fast. So if I, for example, copy a couple of these lines and I paste those down here just to make sure I've got the same data set, then I can copy across and fill down, and we'll just fill down a bunch of lines and then publish those. So I started with like 10 to 15 lines, and now I'm going to have somewhere closer to 50. The question is, do you have the same restriction for the number of records that you can publish? You're harkening back to the static export to Excel limit. No, there's no limit on the records for the Open in Excel experience and the OData service. It's basically just a performance thing. You'll notice that more records takes more time, and it's just whatever the user is happy with waiting for. We actually, to protect the user, inside of the Excel add-in, we have a data governor. So you can see that in the options. Excel has become non-responsive. That's not a good sign. Well, I'll just talk while it's thinking about it. So under the options menu, there's a data governor, which limits the number of cells. And we have that limited to 1 million cells by default. Yeah. So if you have 10 columns, it'll pull down 100,000 rows by default as a limit, and then you can adjust that as needed. It can handle about 2.5. The Excel add-in can handle about 2.5 times that before it starts getting a little flaky. Yeah. And then publishing takes a little bit longer than refresh, but your mileage varies as far as the complexity of the entity, the amount of validation logic that's running on it, things like that. Yeah. Oh, great. Okay, so it finished the publish. It finished the publish and went non-responsive. But how long did the write actually take? So it published 72 rows. Oh, no, that's the refresh. Let's go down to the bottom. No, we do want the top. Yeah, the publish was successful. It published in 7.3 seconds. It created 49 rows. It published successfully in 20.9 seconds, and then it took another 7 seconds to update the cache, and then 7.3 seconds to update the workbook. Great. Okay, great. Yeah. So this, what I was just looking at there is this flag that's down in the bottom right-hand corner, this open the message center, to provide kind of debugging information about what's going on, and then you can flip it to errors only. As soon as an error appears, it'll automatically flip to errors only, so it'll only show the errors underneath there. And you can see all of those lines were created there. And then if I jump back to the client and open up that journal, you can see it has all of those lines, and the client has to page in more data. So that's a real advantage to working out in Excel, where accountants are wanting to, and journal entry specialists are wanting to create a lot of data fast.
What about additional fields in other tabs? Yeah, we can copy
Additional fields and other tabs.
other tabs in the Google lines.
Is your question like these? When you copy the data that you copy, when you're copying this like set of data, you mean? When I did this, it's only copying those values. So only those fields that are represented by those columns are getting created. If there's any defaulting that would happen, that defaulting's all happening as normal. Yep, either table defaulting or entity defaulting. Yeah. And you can add additional fields into here. You'll notice that it's only the main account dimensions that are in here. Tomorrow morning at 10:45, there is a hands-on lab that talks about how to edit these templates, these journal entry templates, to add your dimension fields. So if you're particularly interested in doing journal entry, you'll want to catch that hands-on lab to learn about how to add the extra dimension fields into these templates as well. Yeah. It is not possible to display the name of the account as a column, but you can see now, as opposed to RTW when we first made this available, you can see that they've added a lookup for this field so that you can see the name. So the journal entry folks, the people that we talk to about this experience, the journal entry experience, and I say we, I mean the financials PM, in addition to myself and some others. We had a number of sessions with a number of customers and partners, talking to them about this experience. They talked about how they don't need the segmented entry behavior. They're fine entering in the numbers as a number, but certainly the lookup helps with regards to being able to get a confirmation that, yep, this is the bank account for USD. And then if I come up to this line here and focus on it, it should switch. Yeah, it'll show you that this one is actually the bank account for Chinese renminbi. Yeah. So if you want the name for the main account, yeah, you have to focus on the field to get that name. The question before I came in here was about can you add like lines for my lines for a header, and what does that look like in the designer? So what that looks like is this button. So this journal entry experience, we've updated the add-in to be able to support creating new headers. So like this new journal, I should be able to click on one of these header fields and say new. The problem, the reason why I can't do that is because not all of the identity fields are bound. And then the other problem is that the lines right now for the journal entry template that's out there, they aren't added using this add related table capability. So if I highlight that again, add related table. So this template needs just a little bit of updating, and that should be available in an update coming out soon. But this is how you do like a header lines template and get it related and working properly. So you say, you hit that plus button, and it'll list off all of the data sources that are related to that data source. So for example, the journal header only has a relationship to journal lines. That's the only data source that can be added in here. But that's how you add related in the design experience. Great. All right, I've spent a bunch of time talking about journal entry and the Excel add-ins. So there are a number of templates out there. Again, there's a hands-on lab tomorrow morning that'll run through some of these templates and adding lookups for the dimensions. And all of this is documented out on the wiki as well. So the separate entities for journal entry I should mention. So you can't do, for example, fixed asset journal entry on the same template as you're doing bank journal entry. And that was a conscious choice that the financials team made. They're always open to feedback on that, but that's just a limitation that they put in there. So if you're interested in more details about that, hit up that hands-on lab and check the documentation. Sorry, the question? Can you post to the project ledger? I think that is possible now. I'm not sure on that though. I think that this gap was filled recently, but I'm not certain on that. Yeah, I can check on that for you if you want to stick around and give me your name afterwards. So let's look at a couple of other things. So journal entry. So let's talk briefly about Word. So Word, export to Word is another option that shows up in some of the Open in Office menus. These export to Word options are only representative of templates. So you have to define a template to get an export to Word option. So let's click on Adrian Lannon, and then we'll open the export to Word option for Adrian, and we'll see the template filled in. Great. So this is an example of creating kind of a lightweight report inside of Word. And the design experience for this is done inside of Word. So I showed you before about opening from the Office Store. Actually, what I'll do is I'll grab this template that I was working on before. So this template that I was working on before has the Word add-in inside of it. Apparently, I opened the wrong one. Let me try and open that again. Yes. That's what we were hoping for. Okay, so this is a template that I was working on before. It has the Word add-in added inside of it. So I started from a blank document, said insert from the store, went and grabbed the Dynamics Office add-in, and it opens up in Word. The design experience, you'll notice, is very similar to what we have in the Excel add-in. They share a lot of the same code and the same experience. And so creating a Word template is very similar to creating an Excel template. And so you're just going in there and, for example, if I wanted to add additional fields, I hit that Edit button. And then if I can find, zip code, I'm going to add that value down there. And then I can say Done and Save. And then I'm just going to save this as, I'm going to put this on my PC, do my templates. I'm going to put that there. So if I want to make that available to other users, I can go to the Document Templates forum, which is one of these. Yep, this one here. So you can find that real easily using the search capability. So if you just put in Document Tem, and it'll just auto-complete for you, Document Templates. So on this form is where you'll say New, and then we'll go to that template that I just saved. I need to close it first so that it doesn't interfere with things. Demo attachments. Why am I not seeing it? Documents, demo templates. Documents, demo templates. There we go. Great. Oh, I still had it open. Yeah, save that. Close it. Go back to my document templates form. All right, let's start that again. New. So that's basically the browser trying to access the file at the same time as it's already opened. And it does not like that. Great, so we've got this 2017 fleet customer. We'll say OK. And then back on the customer form, if I pop that menu, let's see if it automatically pulls it up or if I just have to refresh. Let's just refresh the form. And then 2017 fleet customer. So for Adrian again, and we'll just download that. And we have some Adrian Lannon information. So this experience as well, as we saw with this, you can have header and lines in here. So you can create a nice little lightweight reporting experience using Word. So a power user can go ahead and create a bunch of these templates and make them available for sales order and purchase order and different forms and entities that you're interested in making available. Great. We touched on all of that. Template Designer inside of Word, and then Export to Word in the Open in Office menu. And then we looked at the document templates option as well. There's also an API that allows you to do that programmatically, the addition of the document templates, and that's documented out on the wiki as well. So document management. So in addition to all of our add-ins capabilities, we've also got the ability to attach documents, which is a fairly standard capability that we've kept working from AX 2012. It's very similar. We have plans in the future to provide an attachments dialog rather than a full form, but for now it's a full form experience. And you can see we provide a preview for the documents. To add an attachment to a record, you just go up to the attachments button in the top right-hand corner, and then click on New, and then File. And by default, this file is going to send the. We'll just add that template. It's going to send. Actually, we'll go here. It's going to send that template to blob storage, but you can configure the document types to send to SharePoint online as well. So we'll open that. And you can see that document preview provided there on that preview fast tab. You can move through the attachments and see the previews of those attachments. So document attachments, fairly standard, fairly solid. We had a little hiccup recently with the WAPI service that we make use of, where they changed some settings, but that was a small, very minor outage. This is a capability that's very solid. Sorry, question? You can. The question is, can you open the Word document, change it, and save it again? You can open the Word document. You can change the Word document, but when you save it, it's going to be saving to your temporary internet files. So to send it back, you need to reattach it. Yeah. So the opening is just a matter of hitting this open button, and then you just get your standard browser download experience. That question is about drag and drop capability. So that's a future enhancement that we've looked at doing. Drag and drop is a little bit harder on the web, but yeah, it's something that we're keeping in mind for the future. Yeah. And being able to attach multiple files would come along with that as well. Yeah. Question? Yeah, so the question is about the licensing for SharePoint. So yes, you need a license for all of the people that need access to SharePoint. Yes. So you'll buy a license for Office 365 for the tenant, and then you'll associate that with various users. And usually you'll have a one-to-one for Dynamics 365 license and Office 365 license. Yeah. Document management. So we also have a sysmailer email framework that developers can make use of to send emails within Dynamics 365 for operations. The one improvement that we've done to this since RTW is we added support for Exchange Online. So we'll talk directly to Exchange Online as long as you have your license, your Office 365 tenant license set up. We'll automatically detect where that Exchange Online capability, and we'll enable that as a mail provider. And that can be put on various forms. An example of that, let me just jump to the All Customers form. So from the All Customers form, I'll just select this customer and then jump over to Collections. So Collections makes use of this to be able to send collection notices to customers. So you can see transactions to contact. I can hit that button, and then I get this, how would you like to send email? So this is the start of the email experience. I can either say that I want to use an email application, such as Outlook, which will create an EML file, and that'll open inside of Desktop Outlook. And then I can do whatever I want with it and send it as I normally would send email. Or I can use the email client that we build in here, and I'll show you that briefly. So it'll open up. It has a subject, body. It has the attachment, the generated file in here, and then you can send that off to your users, to your customers. The question is, can you paste an image into the body of an email? You can't. No, you can't paste an image into the body of that dialogue. If you want to do images, you'd need to pull it out into Desktop Outlook. Yeah, and then you kind of have full control there. Yeah. Great. So there's an example of that. Yeah, so there's email, full control on the desktop. SMTP is the option that we've had around for a long time, and then the Exchange provider is the new one that we added. So as far as completed since RTW, some things worth calling out. Skype Presence, which in the conference Wi-Fi for some reason does not work, but the Skype Presence is something that will show up on forms that have an email field. So, for example, on this Fleet Customers form, this field right here, this email field, it's trying to display presence, and I'm not sure why the Wi-Fi isn't working quite right. I think maybe my VPN is playing up or something like that. This will show your standard green, yellow, red bubble, and then when you hover over it, instead of saying sign in, it'll have a nice little card. So I can show you an example of that here. So you get a nice little card experience that will show you who that person is, and you'll all be familiar with that from Desktop Outlook. Another thing that we added is the feed control, so you can pull in feeds from Yammer, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So some examples of that are here. So you need to add the feed control programmatically to a form, but then the configuration of it can be done by administrators or power users as needed. So I can show you an example of that.
Will you bring that to the standard workspace in the future, just like you did with Power BI?
Will we bring that to what workspace?
To the standard workspaces that are in operation, so we don't need to customize the workspace.
Yeah, so something that we are going to do in the future. So right now it's something that you need to do programmatically is add the control. In the future, we'll add it so that, yes, it can be added by users like the Power BI experiences. Yeah. So they'll be able to say, I want to add an external feed, and then they'll be able to provide the information associated with that feed. So, for example, on a sales workspace, they'll be able to add a Yammer group that's talking about sales, for example. So if I pull up this external feed configuration form, so this is the one that the administrators and power users can use. So you can see, for example, this is a LinkedIn feed for me, and then I've got another one for Peter Villadsen here. And so parsing the URL is something that's a little bit tricky, We make that easier by having a button up here called parse feed URL. And you just put the URL up here and say parse, and it'll set the feed container, feed ID, and feed type information. So it'll automatically see that, oh, this is a Yammer group or a LinkedIn. It'll look at like Yammer.com or LinkedIn.com. It'll set the feed type appropriately, and then the container and feed ID information as needed. So it's a nice little capability, but yes, as the gentleman here has pointed out, it's kind of limited right now where users can't add the feeds themselves, because that's really where we want to get to. No idea on timing of that one. That one isn't quite as critical as the 2,000 row limit for static export to Excel. In Word, yes, in Word we added the ability to do unbound labels. And we made it easier to get a blank document with the Word add-in inserted. We also did some work around upgrades. So we're working on the AX 2012 to AX 7 upgrade story right now. Sorry. And then we created an entity to make it easier to move from AX 2009 to AX 7. So yeah, we did that. And then just recently we added create header. I talked about that. Create header support, so that soon that journal entry experience the user will be able to stay in the workbook and click on one of the header fields and then say new, and it'll create a new journal in there. So they'll be able to do header and lines rather than having to go back to the client to do the new header. Another thing that we added that is not needed a lot, but publish order support. So we looked at like adding customers and rentals in the same workbook. Our HR folks have created a number of getting started experiences that have where the workbooks contain a bunch of data sources. And some of those have dependencies that aren't able to be resolved automatically. So we added publish order support so that you can, as you're building a workbook, you can go to the options and then go down under the publish options and say configure publish order, and you can change this order so that it publishes in just the right order, just to make sure that it's publishing the header records before the lines records, things like that. So if you've got a bunch of dependencies and things aren't publishing just right, that should be cleaned up now. Yeah, this is just another screenshot, an example of a sales discussion inside of the sales order workspace. So that's that external feed control in use. I won't touch on future plans. So any feedback and questions that you might have, you can always email me. You can come talk to me afterwards. Putting items into Connect is good. Putting comments on the documentation wiki is good. The timelines for updates for operations are rapidly increasing, so we're into monthly cycles now. So it's very hard to talk about when exactly an update is going to happen. We only project out 2 or 3 months in advance at this point. But yeah, certainly if you get in touch on your favorite feature that you're looking for, I can give you some more information about that. All right. Thank you all very much, and I'll be up here for questions afterwards. Thanks. And I'll just I'll leave my mic on for now and answer some of the questions. Yeah.
It's about the SharePoint.
Yeah.
With the on-prem version, do you plan on allowing to store documents on-prem SharePoint as well?
Yeah, so the question's about on-premise SharePoint. Yeah, we're looking to add SharePoint on-premise support sometime after the on-premise AX operations is available. Yeah, so it'll follow, afterwards. It won't be available right. Hopefully in a couple of months. Yeah.
And have you seen the credentials between AX and SharePoint to make sure that someone can only access data that is able to
Right.
access AX?
Right. So the question's about sharing the identity or the security between SharePoint and AX. So right now that's just manual. Yeah. Hopefully we'll come up with some tooling around that. Certainly the security permissions that are separate between operations and CDS right now, there's going to need to be a tooling story there. Hopefully we'll be able to leverage that same tooling story for SharePoint as well. Yeah.
CRM get the same.
Right. And CRM, very similar.
And how do you transport some metadata with the document that you attach in SharePoint so that you could, look into it in SharePoint
Right.
about, some...
Not yet. Yeah, not yet. So the question's about attaching metadata to the SharePoint items. No, we don't do that right now. That's something that we want to do in the future. That was something that we were hoping to add, back in like March, April. We had it like at the top of our list, and it just keeps on getting pushed out. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
That's my question too.
That was your question? Okay. Yeah. The SharePoint metadata? Okay. Yeah.
You have shown sending email from a form.
Yep.
Can you also have a template, for example, sending email to the primary contact of the customer or something, so that you actually not type in the email, but you have some.
Yeah. So the question is about email templates. Yes, there is an email templates capability.
Which you can use for sending, for example, because currently
Yes.
you're less printing, but you're more sending. And
Right. Yeah, you
use
can.
this option, you don't want to type, but you have define some
Yes.
receiving.
Yes, you can put some standard text into templates, and then those can be used as like the starting point for your emails. Yep. I didn't show that. I should maybe show that tomorrow. Yeah, I might work on that for tomorrow. Yeah.
Is there a way you can integrate your work templates within the document management, like we did in 2012?
So
Create a document based on a template and just save it in your document management.
like automatically attach it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you do export to Word, it doesn't automatically attach it. Automatically attaching is something that we've talked to various people about, and it's something that's not all that well liked. They like the idea of being able to just I want to export to Word, I'm exporting all of these things, and then if there's something important, then they attach it. Yeah, it's just something that most people don't want actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We're having issues when we're exporting to Excel, sometimes only 50 rows in the entity.
Static export to Excel? Oh, open in Excel? Okay.
And basically there's a timeout issue.
Oh.
And I'm wondering how we troubleshoot that timeout issue.
Huh.
We
Timeouts.
also have a lot of the login issue, but that one's got answered.
Oh, is that one fixed now? The login issues?
Of the customers to do a full log out and log back.
Okay.
Which they're not happy about, but the timeout issue is really an issue for us.
Timeouts.
And there's only 50 records.
Is
Time it works fine, the next day...
and the timeouts isn't related to the login? They're not accidentally picking up the wrong
you think
identity?
No, I think it's the timeout when loading the data.
Huh. Yeah, I'm not sure. Certainly the query that the Excel add-in issues, you'll be able to see that on the wire. So you can see that in Fiddler. So if you wanted to, you could grab that query and you could execute that, just using Chrome, for example. You could just put that in there and see that the OData response. Right. And you can see the OData feed. That would tell you about the OData feed versus the Excel add-in. And then you can write X++ against the entities as well. So you can always write X++ against the entities to check on the performance of the entities. So that would be kind of my 3-step, is to see, is it the entity, is it OData, is it the Excel add-in? Yeah. See what. Yeah.
Is there a roadmap? I mean, you look ahead 2 or 3 months. We have roadmap.dynamics.com.
Yes.
It doesn't include the platform, does it?
Right. The roadmap does not include the platform so much. We're looking to. We've been having some recent discussions about that. Yes, we're looking to get better at that. One of the key problems is that the platform team that does the Dynamics AX platform, or Dynamics 365 for Operations Platform. Yep. Also does kind of the CDS work. And a lot of the teams, so Office integration, for instance, is like split between the two. Yeah. So
currently, there is not a way to see what is coming in the next 2 to 3 months.
Yeah. So the things that are definitely
referring to.
Yeah, the things that are definitely coming, we'll start putting those out on the roadmap page site.
Cool.
Yep. The problem is like past that. Yeah, it's very hard to project past that. Okay. Yeah.
So that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that sounds good.
Fantastic session.
Okay, great.